Well, good morning. This is Ian R. Crane. It's the morning of Friday, the 12th of October, 2018. And I'm back in my field. Well, it's not my field, of course. It's somebody else's field that who has given us implied permission to be here at Misson Springs in North Nottinghamshire, just down the road from the iGas frack pad. Well, of course, those who follow the live streams will be very aware that yesterday we had a tremendous success in Gateshead, well, in Newcastle Crown Court, following the injunction hearing where Gateshead Metropolitan Borough Council were trying to get a permanent injunction against Mark Steele from sharing his concerns about the 5G and LED streetlights, in Gateshead, and the evidence of the negative health impacts that this technology was having on the residents of Gateshead. Well, I'm going to repeat a little bit of yesterday's live stream just for the benefit of those who didn't catch it yesterday afternoon. But Judge Nolan absolutely demonstrated how the judiciary in this country should operate. He was extremely balanced in his handling of the day to an absolutely packed public gallery. So obviously he was indeed very aware that this was an issue of enormous public and social interest. Well, Mark Steele's bundle of evidence was absolutely rammed with published academic and scientific documentation. And although, because of the time restrictions on the case, to some extent, Mark wasn't able to present that information in open court, the judge clearly reviewed Mark's bundle during the lunch break. And earlier in the day, the Gateshead Council legal team had attempted to dismiss the scientific and academic evidence presented by Mark as pseudoscience. I mean, this is a crass observation. And fortunately, the judge absolutely understood that the evidence that Mark was presenting was sufficient to justify his passionately held concerns about the 5G and LED streetlight technology. And let me tell you that, when I was with Mark a couple of days ago, just sort of working through his skeleton argument, he took me for a short walk around, one of the local parks. And he said, Ian, while we're out, just count the number of birds that you see. And then we were out for, 45 minutes, maybe a little bit longer. And in that time, and I was looking, I saw one seagull, one pigeon, and two crows. And apparently, this is now, one of the most significant visual proofs that something is not right around the Gateshead area. There's no small birds, no sparrows, no starlings, which of course should be starting to congregate at this time of the year. No thrushes, none of the wildlife that I'm used to seeing around me here in North Nottinghamshire. So, Judge Nolan made it very clear that he considered Mark Steele's bundle of evidence to be extremely credible, and as such, he effectively instructed Gateshead Council to desist from their dismissive approach to anyone who asks embarrassing, difficult or hard questions, and actually start to take the concerns of their residents seriously. And when the judge made it clear to Gateshead Council's barrister that he was certainly not going to be putting any kind of injunction that could be regarded as a gagging order on Mark Steele. He said, this is democracy in action. And he got a massive, spontaneous round of applause from the packed public gallery. And if only we saw perhaps more of that, where the judiciary recognised that the residents have genuine concerns, and the corporations, and in this case the councils, the local authority, should not simply ride roughshod over the residents. But the evidence that Mark produced, I mean, one of the witnesses that he was able to call spoke about the nosebleeds that his children had suffered as following the installation of these lights outside his property. And another witness who had lived on the estate for 30 years stated that she'd never had any kind of negative health issues until this technology was rolled out on the estate. So the judge obviously said, he's not a technical expert, but he was sufficiently astute to recognise that these concerns are very much genuine. So let's have a look at Gateshead Council, because Gateshead Council actually is not unique in many ways, and some of the issues that we find when we dig a little bit into Gateshead Council we can find elsewhere, and in fact some I've covered either in the live streams or on episodes of Humanity versus Insanity. So first of all, let me just this is from Mark's research, by the way, so full credit to Mark Steele for putting everything together here. But Gateshead Council is the first council in the UK to set up its own funeral director business. Now, Mark has observed that despite Gateshead Council's denial, Mark had the evidence in his bundle to prove that there are an increase in cancers and an increase in strokes in the Gateshead area. So, Gateshead Council clearly looking to cash in on the opportunity to participate in the burial process based on the increased deaths. Now, what's also interesting is that when Gateshead Council's chief executive, Sheena Ramsey, took the stand, the witness stand, she actually looked like a deer in the proverbial headlights. And let me tell you that the photographs that are on the web are very much old photographs. Either that or she has aged very significantly in the last few months, because she certainly looked about 20 years older in the flesh than she does on any of the photographs that you can find on the web. But when Mark addressed some very pertinent questions to her, she claimed to have no knowledge. And one of the most significant questions that Mark asked her was whether she was aware that the council's strategic director, a guy by the name of Michael Alexander Barker, whose signature was actually on the original application to get Mark injuncted and preventing him from sharing his concerns about 5G and LED streetlights, as to whether she was aware that Michael Barker was actually a director of a number of companies. First of all, he's a director of Regent Funeral Services, and his contact address is the Civic Centre, Regent Street, Gateshead. So the strategic director is a director of the council, is also a director of the new funeral service that Gateshead Council have set up. But it doesn't end there, because Michael Barker is a director of, or was a director rather, of Gateshead Technology Innovation Limited. Now this company is now dissolved, but the registered office of this company was Alcatel-Lucent Telecoms, based in Greenwich, London. Now Alcatel-Lucent is very, very much involved in 5G rollouts. But he's also Secretary of Northern IT Research, and the registered officers of Northern IT Research are Atos Services. And anyone that's ever been caught up in the social services system will be very familiar with Atos. So here is a guy in the employ of Gateshead Borough Council as strategic director. He's director of the Regent Funeral Services, director of Northern IT Research, and yet the chief executive of the council has no knowledge of this. And then she made this observation, by the way, under oath. But as we'll see, Sheena Ramsey perhaps has a casual relationship with integrity. Well, let's have a look at Sheena Ramsey, shall we, in a little bit more detail, because it's really important that the people of Gateshead start to appreciate the criminal nature of local authorities. And of course, nothing is more criminal than the council being totally dismissive of the residents' concerns. And of course, this is something that the judge absolutely picked up on. But Sheena Ramsey's memory of the occasion when Mark Steele presented his concerns to the full council were very different from the actual evidence, because Sheena Ramsey claimed that Mark was very aggressive, that he'd sort of walked up to the podium where the chief executive and the mayor were sitting and sort of got right in their face. But Mark had the video, and the video wasn't taken by him, it was taken by somebody else in the council chamber, and it clearly showed Mark giving his presentation from the appropriate lectern, and at no point did he ever leave it. No point did he actually walk up to the chief executive and get in her face and behave aggressively. So, Sheena Ramsey, under oath, clearly she had the wrong brain in yesterday. Well, Sheena Ramsey was appointed to Gateshead Council as chief executive in November 2016. And the headline in the Chronicle at that time was, Gateshead Council hires new chief executive to steer authority through the tough years. Well, previously, she had been with Knowsley Council in Liverpool, and a couple of years previous, 3 years previously, she actually was paid a £330,000 golden handshake as part of a redundancy program. So here was Sheena Ramsey in Knowsley on a salary of £195,000 and receives a payout of £330,000. And then she basically walks straight into the job of managing director of Worcester City Council, where she's taken a massive salary drop, but she can afford to, obviously, because she's just had a big payout. So she's at Worcester City Council on a salary of £105,000, but she's only there for 15 months because supposedly she's headhunted by Gateshead Council, where she takes up the appointment of chief executive on a salary of £160,000. So let me put this in perspective for you. This woman, who yesterday seemed to have a serious difficulty recollecting the events of less than a year ago, but since 2015, she has effectively received, out of public funds, £950,000, and that doesn't include pension benefits and any other sort of non-direct remuneration. So this is the type of individual that councils put into the chief executive role to effectively lie, deceive and obfuscate, to effectively just keep the masses quiet whilst the technology is rolled out and causing significant harm, but the council can then benefit from that because it's got its own funeral service. So there's something else here as well, that when Sheena Ramsey was at Worcester, there was a bit of a scandal, which might explain why she was only there for 15 months. And in a tribunal ruling, Judge Annabel Pilling found Worcester City Council guilty of deliberately withholding information relating to allegations of corruption against the former managing director, Sheena Ramsey. Now, call it a massive hunch, but I suspect that Sheena Ramsey is a graduate of Common Purpose, because this is the pattern that we see. This charity that was set up in the late 80s by Julia Middleton is effectively the school to identify the sociopaths to be put into senior public positions to effectively destroy civil society, to destroy public services. And anyone who says this is a conspiracy theory, just take a look at what's going on around you. And at AV 9.1 in December, we'll be actually looking at the academic evidence that proves that what is unfolding here is an agenda that's been established by the globalist corporatist billionaires whose definition of freedom is to do whatever the hell they like, regardless of the impact on the wider population. So yesterday was a very, very good day for what's left of democracy, with Judge Nolan recognizing Mark's passion and effectively putting a much reduced injunction on him that simply prevents him from becoming a little bit too passionate. But as Judge Nolan said, under no circumstances would he entertain any request to prevent Mark Steele from raising his concerns about 5G or LED street lighting. And in fact, he said, that this is an issue that has very, very significant public interest, and the onus is on Gateshead Council to take the concerns of the residents seriously and to cease and desist from simply being dismissive. Well, let's hope that today in London, Mr. Justice Supperstone hasn't received a phone call overnight advising him of the facts of life. Let's hope that he simply reflected upon the evidence presented in the royal courts yesterday, and that he will uphold the application for an injunction against Quadrilla. And in Francis Egan's evidence presented in court yesterday, Francis Egan said, Francis Egan whined that every day we have an injunction in place, it's costing us £94,000. Well, sorry, Francis, but you're confusing us with someone who cares. We care as much about you losing £94,000 a day as you care about the impact that you will have and have had on the local community around Preston Road. And as we all know, if you have your way, then ultimately you will litter the Fylde Peninsula with something in the region of 120 well sites that you don't care about the impact on the community. So, frankly, don't expect any sympathy whatsoever about the fact that the injunction is costing Quadrilla £94,000 a day. And frankly, obviously what is being highlighted in court is the crass incompetence of a cowboy outfit and the total disregard that they show for the local communities. So what we're seeing right now is the power of community activism. It's where communities get involved. It's where communities actually hold local authorities to account. And when central government overrides those local authorities, the communities don't simply roll over, they continue the fight, and they actually raise awareness amongst other communities that unless they start to take an interest, then this is what is going to happen to them. Now, call it a hunch, But I sense that, within probably 6 to 9 months, any suggestion that the UK is going to be subjected to fracking will have disappeared, not quite into history, but the Tory government will have taken on board the fact that if they push ahead with this agenda, they definitely will not be in office in 2022. Well, there's another problem coming down the pipe, and that's 5G and LED street lighting. And just as 6 years ago, a number of people were trying to dismiss concerns about fracking as just rampant conspiracy. But once they do their own research and discover for themselves what has occurred everywhere where this industry has rolled out, they realize that the only conspiracy is one by the corporatists to rape and pillage the environment and communities for the benefit of a few globalist billionaires. And it's going to be the same with 5G, except the effects on the community will be felt much quicker than with fracking, and will be potentially far more devastating. So if you haven't yet looked at the issue of 5G and the microwave frequencies that are associated with the 5G rollout and the intended agenda of 5G, then I would encourage you to do so. And of course, it's only when each one of us realizes that there is a real problem, and it's going to affect each and every one of us and our families, and of course the children are going to get it worse, that then it takes on a real life, and we realize that we have to get involved. And although primarily I'm addressing the audience in the UK, I know there's people watching from Australia and from the US, and we know you have the same problems, because 5G is planned for a global rollout in 2020. And funnily enough, Israel has decided that it will not be rolling out 5G technology. I will leave you to ask yourself the question as to why that might be. Meanwhile, have a great weekend, and if you are anywhere near Sheffield tomorrow, then do go along to Barker's Pool in Sheffield tomorrow afternoon, where there will be a massive gathering for Global Frackdown. Now, this is an initiative of Food and Water Watch, but the Sheffield anti-fracking community, the South Yorkshire anti-fracking community, are hosting a carnival event throughout the afternoon and into the evening in Sheffield. So if you're anywhere in the area, do pop along and meet with some like-minded people there. Okay, thanks for joining me this week, and a date for your diary is I'll be back in court with Mark Steele on October the 23rd, where he will be facing the criminal charge of called public nuisance, basically, against two Gateshead councillors. And yesterday, one of those councillors did not exactly cover herself in glory in the witness box, so let's see if she gets some coaching between now and October the 23rd. But I'll update you more on that a bit nearer the time. You have a great weekend.